All right, so for those of you who don't know, PIC 104 today was having some issues with Wi-Fi, so I'm just going to re-record kind of a quick tutorial on what I went over in class today, and I'll try to touch on questions that were asked in class, but you'll also still have the recordings from Sammy Spoon and Atusa from their labs, as well as a recording from one of our GEs last year, Kyle. So that should be plenty of information for you guys to get started on Revit for this project. So first you're going to need to download Revit. So hopefully you have that student version already installed on your computer. If you're having issues with getting Revit, you can also use one of the loaner computers from the school or access the virtual lab, which some of you may have used during COVID times. So there's a lot of options for using Revit. If you're struggling with the technology, just reach out to one of your GEs if you're not able to figure that out. But to get started, I actually want you guys to navigate to Canvas. So you're going to open that up and go to the tab that says Files. And in there, you'll go to the Project folder, Project 1, Resources. And within this folder, you're going to find a ton of helpful information for this project. So there's going to be not only detail examples from last year's project 2 and other helpful detail examples, but there's also drawing conventions to make sure that you're doing those right, layers, things that we went over today in lecture that were just added today, and some text references as well as a little self checklist to kind of go over after you're done with project 1. But for today's purposes, I'd like you to navigate to this Revit families folder. And for now, you can just go ahead and download that and put it on your desktop or somewhere you can easily access it during this tutorial. But just all I need you to do for now is download that. So then once that's downloading, you can get back over to Revit, and I need you to go over to the side here where you will open new and just make sure you're going under models and not families. So it's a new model. So you're going to go to new, and then it's going to ask you to pick a template. I've only ever used Imperial Architectural Template. Couldn't tell you what happens otherwise, but that's the one you'll want to use. So that'll open up, and then you kind of get brought immediately to this homepage, and that is always going to be your level 1 on the floor plans. So that's where your starting view is. So one of the first things you can do when you're starting drawing is, you know that your floor plans are supposed to be at a certain scale. I believe it's 3/8 inch over 1 foot. So you can go down here to the bottom left-hand corner, and that's where all of your scales are going to be. And then you're going to get a bunch of options. So this is one of the great features of Revit that really allows you to kind of adjust the project as necessary without having to do a lot of work manually. So there's your home page. I've now adjusted the scale to 3/8 inch. The next thing you're probably going to want to go ahead and set up before you get drawing is in elevation. So if you go over to the side tab here, you should have the project browser. So that's this bottom one here, and you'll see elevations listed out. Any one of these is fine to set the levels. It really doesn't matter, just one of them. So in here, you'll see there's already 2 levels that kind of come preset in Revit. The great thing about these is that when you draw something like a wall or a floor, it will host to these levels, so kind of lock itself to those levels. And that means when you adjust them too, the item that's on that level will actually move with the levels. So it's really nice when you're trying to kind of adjust things after a couple rounds of schematic design. You can kind of adjust things and it will automatically do that for you. But let's just say that instead of 10 feet, I want my level 2 to be 8 feet. What I'm going to do is I'm going to hover over it until I get this box. And then I click once, just one left click on it. And that allows me to get into the box, and I can just type in the number 8, and automatically it sets it to 8 feet. So now I've got level 1, level 2. And let's just say that I need a foundation level because I want to actually model my foundation. We don't recommend that. I'll get into that a little bit later, but say you want to model it. Then you're going to right click once on the already highlighted object, and that'll bring up this side menu. We're going to go to create similar, and then you can draw another level. And the other way you could do that is if you just click on it and then you type in the letters CS on your keyboard, it will do the same thing. But for now, we're just going to Control Z that, and we're going to use level 3 as our foundation level. And let's say that level 3 keeps confusing me. I just can't figure out what I'm talking about when I see level 3 on my plans. Well, you can click into that one the same way you can click into the height, and I can change the name to foundation. And then it's going to ask you, would you like to rename the corresponding views? That just means on this side pane, it's going to rename everything that says level 3 right now to foundation. So we'll say yes. And then you'll see it reordered it because it's lower than level 1, and it automatically renamed it. So that's how you add in levels. And then from there, let's go back to our level 1. And this is kind of where all of the tabs you open will show up along here. So a lot of times I'm navigating around on here, but if you can't figure out how to get back, you can also use this side pane the same way. So I open up my level 1, and now let's say I want to draw some walls. So let's go over to the architecture tab and then wall. You click on that and it automatically defaults to these generic walls. You'll see a lot of different options in here that are kind of preset. I would recommend for this project that you stick to these generic walls, and you can adjust the sizing of those. But the problem with something like this one, for example, is that when you draw it, and if it's the correct detail mode, then you're going to be able to see all of these layers, but we're not using brick or any of the layers that are in here necessarily. So that won't really be helpful when it comes to cutting sections and other things later on. So I would highly recommend that you stick with these generic walls and then just adjust the thickness based on how thick your assembly is once you've decided the layers. So how you do that is that you go over here to this pane, and basically anytime you want to change something in Revit, you're going to go to edit type. So we're going to go edit type. And what we're going to do is we're going to immediately, first step is duplicate it. I will show you what happens when we don't duplicate it. So currently this is labeled as an 8-inch generic wall. And I'm just going to go in right away to that edit tab and change it. Let's say I want it to be a 1'4" wall. Then I hit OK and OK again. So the thickness changed in plan. Like if I take a dimension, it is currently 1'4", but when I click on the component, it's still called 8-inch wall. So that can get really confusing, and that is why we immediately duplicate. So I'm going to Control Z my way back to an actual 8-inch wall. And then what we're going to do is we're going to duplicate. So duplicate, and then I'm going to label it 1'4", and then go back in same way we did it before and change it to the 1'4". This is also where you can change the material, and it shows you options to build up a bunch of layers if you want to. I would recommend to never build up your layers in the actual wall itself. We will draw in over the top and we will fake it in. And even in professional practice, that is what they do. They have never that I have seen have they ever built out a wall completely in this this area. So please don't try to do that, especially for this project. That will not help you. So that's how you change your walls. And then you may have noticed when I was drawing walls before that it gives you this live dimension that goes along with it. That is super helpful for just understanding what size you're drawing right off the bat. So one of the cool things about this function is that if I get into my wall to make it, so I clicked CS again to start drawing a wall, but you can easily navigate back to your architecture tab and hit wall. Then you click once and then don't click again. Just type in the number so we know it has to be a 34-foot long wall. So I'm just going to type in 34 and hit enter. automatically now I have a 34-foot wall. I also accidentally right click during that process. So I apologize for that. It kind of duplicated my wall, but now I have a 34-foot wall. So that's one of the great parts of Revit. Another great thing is that this one's also 34, but we know that that one's actually supposed to be 17 feet based on the project brief. So what I can do is I can highlight it. You'll see the dimensions showing up. I hover over the box again. And if I type in 17, it will adjust my wall so that it's now 17 feet. So it's really easy to be pretty precise in this program because of the settings that it offers. So I'm just going to create similar again and create another 34-foot wall and a 17-foot wall. So now we've got our 34 by 17 structure. Great. Let's look at that in 3D. There it is. Beautiful. So the thing that you'll notice about this is that it's actually showing up to look taller than the levels we set, right? So how you know if something is the correct sizing, and it will automatically default to this other setting, is by clicking on the wall and navigating to the side tab. So automatically it assumes that it's unconnected to a level and it's 20 feet. What you can do is make sure it's at level 1 for the base constraint. And then you can select level 2. And automatically now it has snapped to level 2 for its height. At least it should have. Yep, so that it's 8 feet tall. And you can go ahead and do that for the rest of your walls. And in Revit, to select multiple things, you can either drag like this while holding your control key, or for Mac users, command. But the other way to do it is to like hand select one by one, also holding the control button. Either one works. And we're going to change that to be to level 2 as well. So now they're all going to be 8-foot tall walls for us, and it's easy to see. And oh, another thing for how to move around in this 3D view is that you hold your shift key and then you use your right click arrow and you can kind of pan around pretty easily. Another thing about getting to 3D, I'm not sure I went over already, this button up here, the little house, that's how you get to your 3D view and you can see what things are looking like. Okay, so that should cover walls pretty well. Now, let's say I need a floor. Well, hopefully we're still in this architecture tab here, and not too far over from the wall button is the floor button. So I'm going to click floor, and it automatically gives me this option here. And this is essentially just the pick walls function. I can pick my walls and it automatically sketches some floor plan for me. The other way to do it would be to just select one of these shapes and you can just draw it in. And the pink line means we're in editing mode. But I don't want my wall to have a hole in, or my floor to have a hole in the middle, which this would cause a floor with a hole in the middle. So we're going to get rid of that middle one and call it okay. So now if I go back to my 3D view, and again, that'll show up here because you've already been in that view, or you navigate up here. And there's my floor. And let's say I want a second floor, right? I can do the same thing again. So we're going to draw it, but this time I want it to be on level 2. And let's say I want it to be just kind of like a partial loft situation. So I draw it in. I'm going to say don't attach for this one. I usually say don't attach. It's kind of getting in the weeds to let you know why or why not we do that. But for now, I would just recommend saying don't attach. And then we've got our second floor and it automatically snapped to that level 2. So you can see how this level function can be quite helpful in the future. So now we need a roof. I'm going to go back to my level 1, and you don't have to draw in a level 1 view. It just makes it a lot easier. So we're still on the architecture tab. I'm going to navigate to roof. I'm going to click on that, and it's going to kind of do the same thing it does with the walls, where it kind of auto generates a generic one. That's absolutely fine for the process of this project. In this kind of a class where we can just fake in a lot of the details by drawing lines, and I'll show you that a little bit later. So we're going to go to here, and I'm going to draw a rectangle. So if you look at these little wedges that are showing up, those actually define the slope of the roof. So if I were to just say, okay, great, and go to 3D view, what it would show is, well, A, it's not snapping to the right level, so we can change that really easily with the click of a button, but it's also showing that every single side of that roof has a slope to it because they all had that little triangle symbol. So first of all, let's change this so that it's no longer on level 1. We're going to navigate over here. We're going to change it to level 2. So now it's sitting in the right spot, but it's not doing the right thing, right? So the way you can get back into this is to double click, and then it shows the pink line. If it's showing the pink line, you know that you're editing. So I'm back in level 1 view, and I am going to take the slope off of 3 of these walls, and you go by either here or here, and you can just uncheck that. And now it's only showing 1 wall sloping. And another bit of information we already know from the project brief is that this roof is a 4:12 slope. So Revit is great, and you can simply click into it down here or over here and change it to 4:12. And automatically this roof will now be sloped at the correct angle that we want you to have it sloped at. So we're getting there, we're getting somewhere, right? But my walls aren't touching my roof. That's a bit of an issue, right? So what you can do is you hover over and you select your walls, again, holding control the whole time to select. And then you can go to the top here, and there's this option called attach top to base. Now, I said we weren't going to attach our floor before, but this is slightly different. This is more of an aesthetic exterior thing. So we're going to hit attach top to base with our walls already selected, and then I'm going to hit the roof. And then did you see it automatically brought all of my walls up to the correct height? So even though they're hosted to the correct level, they're now also connected to the roof correctly. And I didn't do the back one, so I have to do that. And that is how you make sure that all your walls meet your roof. You'll notice we got our roof to slope the correct direction, but it also is supposed to have an overhang, right? So I'm going to double click onto that again, and pink line, so we know we're editing. I'm going to go back to level 1. And if I select all of the lines at once, I get this option over here called overhang. If I click into, ooh, it might not let me do it that way. I might have to individually select these lines. Oh, that's interesting. Okay. Well, it's not letting me do the overhang function right now, but typically you can change the overhang right here by typing in the number just the same way that we do with the dimensions or anything else where you type in the number. So you should be able to change that. I'm not sure what's going on with that function right now. But another way to do it, if you want to do it another way, is just to check if your dimension is correct. So currently it's showing that it is 1 foot 10 away from the wall. So we can do 2 feet in the front and then 1 foot on each side. And again, I apologize about that overhang thing. I'm not entirely sure why that wouldn't be working, but we can still do it manually. And here you see how it's kind of snapping to the middle of the wall. I don't really want it to. I want it to snap to the edge so that I can see. I have currently clicked on this little circle right here, and I'm like holding the mouse down. So I've left clicked and I'm holding, and I can pull it over until it highlights this. But if it doesn't catch that, you can just hit the tab button while also holding down still, and then let go, and it should snap it to that wall. So 1 foot And then you can do that on all sides. For the sake of going fast, I won't do that, but that is how you get a roof overhang. And it looks like I accidentally took off the slope too. Got to redo that. Again, going up to there, 4 to 12. Okay. And because I attached my walls to my roof later, it automatically made sure it still did that. So that's great about Revit. So now we've got walls, floor, and a roof. That's pretty easy, pretty quick. And from here, we're going to want to know how to start our drawings. So navigate back to your level 1. And then we're going to go up to this top tab. And we've only been using architecture so far, but I want you to go over to the view tab. And in view, you'll see section, call out, elevation, all those great architectural tools. So let's start with a section. So I clicked on the section. And for this project, we want you to do a section that is not longitudinal, but transverse, because we want to see that high end of the roof in section. And you only need to do one section. So this is how you do that. And this little dotted line that I'm dragging around basically just tells you what extents of the view you're going to see. So if I pulled it in here, we would not see that back wall. So I'm going to make sure that we can see the back wall. And then from this view, one of the great things about Revit is that if I double click on this little blue arrowhead, it's going to bring me right to that section. So we'll be able to see everything we drew so far. Great, right? But all these lines and this border and everything, it kind of gets messy, right? So what you can do is you can select your levels, and I'll add that one in. And remember, hold control when you're trying to select multiple things at once. And then you can right click on one of those components, and there's an option to hide it in view. So I'm going to hide the elements. And that just means that it's not going to show up in this view. It doesn't mean they've gone away completely. If you delete it, it will go away completely. But if you don't delete it, you can just hide it in the view. And to get that back or see that again, the little unhide button is here. So you'll be able to see what's hidden. And then if you really want to bring that back and unhide it completely, you highlight the objects that are hidden, go to unhide element, and then toggle reveal hidden mode. Since I want them hidden, I'm going to leave them that way. And then this border, how do I get rid of this border, right? That's kind of annoying. Well, first of all, this is actually going to crop my view. So if this were here, as you can see, we're not going to see the bottom of the building. So this determines how far within the model that you're seeing. So that's good to keep in mind. If sometimes you're having a hard time seeing something, it's disappeared, it might just be outside of your viewport. But you can hide that by going down to this little toolbar again, this little crop one with the light bulb, not the one without the light bulb, but the one with the light bulb. And it's going to be called hide crop region. And if I select that, now that border goes away. And from here, I'm free to draw all over and show my insulation and my other layers. So you can draw right over the top of this drawing, and you'll be able to basically show everything that you need to, including those cross members that are holding up the roof. I wouldn't recommend trying to 3D model those. You can simply draw them in, which I will show you how to do the detail lines and filled regions in just a second. So that's how you do a section. And elevation is quite a similar process. So we would go to this view tab, we go to elevation, and we want the framing elevation. So if you hit on this little arrow next to it, we want this one. So, okay. We don't want framing elevation. We want regular elevation, and we want interior elevation. I apologize. So let me reiterate that again. We're going to go to view. We're going to go to elevation. Don't hit that little side arrow, just hit elevation. And then when you get into that, you can select interior elevation. Now we're getting our little bubble. So this is the little bubble you want to see. And so this would give you those exterior elevation views. They are not required for this project, but definitely helpful to make sure that you've been doing it right. And again, this is the same as the section arrow, where if you click into the arrowhead, it should bring you to that view. So I'm going to double click, and now I can see my elevation. And this is the same process as before. You're going to have to do this basically every time you create a new view, is you're going to want to hide your level lines unless you feel that it's necessary in that drawing, and then also hide your crop region. And then you have a beautiful elevation. So from here, let's go back to our level 1. And the last thing I want to show you before we get into detail lines and filled regions is the call out function. So we're still in the view tab where the section and the elevation are located, and right in between the two is the call out button. And we talked about this first day of labs, so hopefully everyone's familiar with that by now and what that means. But I can just drag and draw over a section of area, and then same as elevation and section, double click into that bubble, and now I've got my call out view. So look at that. We already have the basis for our detail, and you're already partway there. So one of the things about this view is, because we're going to be doing a lot of drawing on top of this view in particular, I would highly recommend that you pin it. So what I mean by that is you're going to select the viewport, and then you're going to navigate up to here. Hopefully it's already on modify, but if it's not, navigate over to modify. And then you're going to hit this little pin. You're going to pin it. So now that it's pinned, even if I tried to move my viewport, it won't move. If I unpin it and then I move around my viewport, you can see that it does move around. So that's why we recommend you pin it. That way, when you're drawing, you don't accidentally scooch it over and then completely have to worry about realigning everything. This will just make your life easier. And another thing that'll make your life easier is, once it's pinned, just turn it off. It would be best practice just to turn it off. So from here, you can draw all of your detail lines. You can change the scale. Don't forget that scale button. So I'm pretty sure this corner detail drawing is supposed to be at 3 inches equals 1 foot. So that's the scale I just chose. And now we can get into detail lines and annotations. And this is mainly how you're going to be drawing your details, whether it's in a firm or in this class. It's a lot of times what designers are using are detail lines and regions, as well as this installation tool right here. So what I've done is I've gone over to the annotate tab, and you want to navigate to somewhere in the middle and you'll find detail lines. So let's click on that. And from here, you can select a bunch of different type of lines, and this is how you get your correct line weights. And we talked about that first day as well. So hopefully that's locked in, but I can show you kind of what a thin line looks like. So let's just stick with thin lines. That's what that line weight looks like. And then if I were to select medium lines, you can sort of see the difference. It's a little hard unless you zoom in, which is again kind of why at the beginning I recommend that you kind of print things out when you can. And then this is what the wide line looks like. So those are your different line types that come standard with the program. But let's say I want to have a WRB line that's red and dashed, because that will help me better understand my drawing. So how we do that is we would go over here to the Manage tab. So you're going to click on Manage at the top, and then look for that little wrench icon. It's called Additional Settings. This is kind of like hidden. So there's Line Styles. Click on that. And then from here, you're going to click on this little plus button, and you should see basically all of the line types that you saw before when we were selecting lines from the little box, drop-down box. So from here, I can create a new type of line, and that might just be a plain black line that's somewhere in between the preset thin line and preset medium line. That would be helpful, or a gray line. I'm going to quickly demo what a WRB line might look like. So I'm going to hit new. I'm going to title it WRB, hit OK. And then from here, there's 3 settings that I can change. So the thickness, I'm going to make mine a 4. It goes all the way to 16. That is quite chonky. I would not recommend using anything over maybe a 5. That is probably as wide as your widest line is going to get. Let's see, what does our wide line say it is? Oh yeah, so that's at 5. So I wouldn't go much larger than a 5. And then in here we have different colors. So I'm going to change mine to red so it's easier to see and differentiate. And then I want mine to be a dash dot so that I can really tell that it is something different going on there. Then you're going to hit OK. And from here, if I select one of these, I'm going to select my wide line. From this drop-down menu, I should now see my WRB line. So once I change it, now I've got a WRB. So from here, you can kind of adjust it, put it in the right locations, which is not on the interior, it's on the exterior. So definitely a helpful tool, and you can make a bunch of different line types from that same process. And another helpful tool to draw these details would be the filled region. So they're right here underneath detail lines. We're going to click on region, and then let's just draw a box real quick. I want to show you what happens when I just draw whatever from the immediate context. That will give you this box with lines all the way around the side and a diagonal crosshatch pattern. That's great, but we want, let's just say, some plywood. Well, how do I do that? You're going to go here to edit type, just like we did with the walls. And then you're going to duplicate it again, because if we didn't duplicate it, it's going to be a problem where it kind of replaces diagonal crosshatch with something else, but it stays the same name. So it can get quite confusing. So we're going to duplicate. We're going to call it plywood and then hit OK. And from here, I can go in. So let me redo that one more time because I didn't really explain that step. I went to the foreground fill pattern and it's listed as diagonal crosshatch. There's this 3 little dots. I clicked on that. And now I am in with the options, and you can see things like plywood are already built in for you. So it's great. We shouldn't see any incorrect hatch patterns because they already are built in for you. So here's plywood. I'll show you a couple other ones. There's your rigid insulation. Here's your gypsum plaster, earth, aluminum, concrete, and a few other patterns such as wood that you might use on, say, a wood cladding or something. But we're going to select plywood. Okay. And then if I hit OK again, now if I zoom in, sometimes if it just shows up like a gray box like that, it's because we are too zoomed out to see. So we just have to zoom in a little bit, and then you should be able to see the correct hatch pattern. Another thing that you can do from here is change it. Say the black lines are just too harsh and they're creating too much contrast in my drawing. I can click on this, click on your plywood filled region. You go to edit type again, the same place we just changed it. And then you can change the line to be gray. So now it's a little less harsh to the eye, right? Well, what if this pattern inside of it is super out of scale, right? Well, edit type, go to the 3 dots like we did last time when we changed the material, but this time instead of, so we're not only supposed to duplicate the filled region, but also duplicate the pattern. So that's right here, same pane where we got the edit from. So I'm going to duplicate the pattern, and now I can change the scale. So I'm going to call that one plywood 2. I'm going to change the scale. And then now you should see the 2 options. So there's plywood 2, and there's plywood 1. So that's scaling. what happens if there's something like gravel, which you'll have to draw, and it's not in there, it's not preset. So what you can do for that is, again, go to edit, type. I'm going to duplicate it. I'm going to name it gravel and hit OK. And then I'm going to do the same process that we did before, where we go into this pane. But this time, I'm going to go to this model tab, which is just some more hatch patterns in here, but none of them are gravel. And under this model tab, I'm going to hit this little orange one that says new fill pattern. So we're going to hit new fill pattern. I'm going to label it, oh, not yet. We're going to go to custom and then label it gravel. We actually provided a lot of the stuff you'll need for this project. So we already have the gravel hatch pattern. You just need to load it into your Revit. So how you do that is by going to browse, and then it may be on your desktop or wherever you located it. I'm going to go find mine. And so in this families folder you downloaded, there's going to be 3 folders. It's going to be under the annotation folder. And in there, you'll see a little fx.pat, and that's the gravel pattern. You'll open that up. And voila, we have gravel. So now gravel is loaded into your project, and you can do the scaling thing in there as well. Any of the fill patterns can be scaled or changed, and their color can be changed as well to be gray or black or whatever you need. So that is how you use a filled region. And there's a lot of different ways you can manipulate it too. For example, I just double clicked into it, and let's say I don't want to see the exterior border at all. I can highlight all of the lines, change them to invisible lines. And then, oh, and this is another thing. So you'll see no lines around it anymore, but Revit will ask you all the time to save your project. It's one of its great features. I would highly recommend you hit save every time it kind of brings that up to you, because it's probably been a good hour since you have saved. So definitely make sure you're saving often and take it up on its offer. I'm not going to, because this is just a demo model. But that is filled regions, and that's how you adjust them. And that's a way that you can draw in your rigid insulation, your plywood, your gypboard. Any of that can be drawn in with regions, and then anything else that isn't able to be drawn as a region can be drawn with detail lines. So it's really not about building it in 3D, it's about building it in 2D. And this is how you would do that. And another tool that is super helpful is this insulation tool right here. It's right next to your detail lines and your regions. It's over here. So you select that. And from here, let's just say we have a 2x6 stud cavity, right? So that means I've got 2x6 pieces of wood as my framing for this ADU. Well, then I'm going to need 6 inches of batt insulation, right? So I would go up to this little tab right here. I'm going to type in 6, and then if I draw it, it will show up with 6 inches of insulation. So yay, Revit, it does it for us automatically. So this is one of the super helpful functions you can do as well. So hopefully everyone's got that so far. I wish I could, stop and ask for questions, but hopefully everyone's got that. And now let's just say I need to bring this drawing into a sheet. Well, how do I do that? How you're going to do it is you're going to use this project browser bar. You're going to scroll all the way down and you'll see this sheets tab. For now, since I don't have any sheets, it doesn't have one of the little plus bars. Once I add sheets, you'll see that little plus appear, and then you can pick which sheet you're going to choose. But for now, let's highlight sheets, right click, and go to new sheet. So Revit automatically gives you this 30x42. It's okay. It's nice. It comes with a title block, but it's not a very common page size, I would say, that I've used in school a lot. So what we're going to do is we're going to load again, kind of like we did with the gravel. We're loading in something from off our computer. And that is also going to be in that folder that we gave you. So we gave you the folder that has annotations, and you're going to go back into that folder again. I just have to navigate back to mine. And then once you get in there, you'll see the 11 by 17 title block RFA. So you'll select that, open it up, and it's going to show up in your list. Make sure that's highlighted and then hit OK. And now we have a sheet. So from here, these are pretty editable. The way you edit a sheet is by clicking into it like that. I just double clicked on top of it and it kind of opened it up in a new tab. This is what's called a family. So that means we're going to kind of load it in and out of the model as we change it. But you can adjust the name, your GE's name, things like that from here. And then once you do make those changes, you load it back into the project and close, which is up here at the top. So I'm going to load into project and close. I'm going to say no this time, but you can save it if you want to. And then automatically anything you change should show up right here. So that's how you kind of adjust the sheet naming and stuff like that. And now I want to put my pretty call out that I just drew on a sheet. How do I do that? Well, you find it on the tab, project browser tab. You make sure it's highlighted. I'm going to left click and hold, and I'm going to drag it and drop it. And then it will automatically pop up on my sheet. So we've got our detail drawing on our sheet. Well, what am I going to do now? Because this weird box is showing up and there's this weird title. How do I adjust that? So this is your viewport, and how you adjust it is by going into edit type. And if you want to turn off that title, you can go right here. This show title option has a yes on it. We can change that to no. So if I hit no, it goes away and now there's no title in my way. Another way that you can edit this is by double clicking in, and then you can turn on and off the viewport box and say you don't like the sizing of it. Well, currently it's pinned, so I'm going to unpin it. I'm going to drag it in a little bit closer so that it's within the sheet constraints. And then we're going to hit or click outside of it. And we're going to hit this button here to turn it back off. So now I've successfully messed around with my viewport. What do I do if my drawing's kind of going off the page like this? That doesn't look great. We've also helped you out in that realm. So you can either edit this in this view by just clicking in and out of the viewport and, you know, fixing those lines of the wall. In a moment, I'll show you that. Or we can go into the call out tab and make changes in here. So if I got rid of this in this tab, it's going to automatically update on the sheets. So just remember that whenever you've dragged something onto a sheet and it's another view, you can either edit it on the sheet or you can edit it off the sheet, and either way it will show up as the changes you've made. So I don't want to see those lines, but I can't delete it because it's a wall. Well, you can bring in what's called a break line, and you'll see that on your checklist too. If you use the checklist, that's something that you want to see show up on your drawings. So that's something that will load in as well. So I'm going to go to architecture. I'm going to go to component. And from there, I'm going to click on this component, and it's going to default to a desk. I'm not really sure why, it just does. Edit type, edit type, and then load. So this is going to be kind of your best friend for bringing in windows, doors, any other kind of component or thing, an item, a 3D item. And how I'm going to do that is by simply opening up that folder that you downloaded. And then you're going to go find the break line symbol, which is in the annotations folder. And then I'm going to double click. It's going to ask me to upgrade the model because this is an older model from a project way back when. So you're going to hit upgrade model. And then it loads it in for you. And just like with the sheet, when we were editing the sheet, you're going to have to load it into the project, and then you can do load into project and close. So we're going to do that. And it defaults to my first floor. I'm just not going to click anywhere, and I'm going to automatically switch my view so that I'm in the callout view. And then I'm going to select click down. And now I have my break line in there. From here, I can manipulate it by rotating. So your modify tab has kind of all of those things like aligning, rotating, offsetting, moving, copying, things like that. So I'm going to rotate it. And voila, I no longer see that weird, awkward, abrupt end of the drawing, and that will update in here as well. So that will make sure that your drawings are up to speed and definitely the best practices. So I'm just going to do it on both sides real quick. And you can try that too. So now we've got that all set. Well, great, we have all the lines and our drawing looks great, but there's no labels, right? So in order to label, it's also under the annotate tab. So a lot of the stuff you'll need is in annotate. So here's that detail line, region, installation from before. Right next door is text. So you're going to click on text, and then I'm just going to type in some rigid insulation. What we don't have any rigid insulation drawn, but what we can do is we can add a leader line, and we can point to wherever the rigid would be drawn on the picture. So that's how you do the leader lines. And something that you can also do with those is you can mess with how they're jogging. So if you remember on the first day when I mentioned that all of your leader lines should be lined up, this is how you do that. And you can really ensure it because, as you saw just now, it creates a little dashed line. So you'll be able to tell if something is aligned or not. So that is how you mess with your leader lines. You can also navigate to this tab where it can kind of align all of your text as well as aligning the leader lines themselves. So you can do that all from there. And then let's just say I have a lot to label on this drawing and there's not enough room on the page because the text is too big, right? Well, then I would go over here to our old friend, edit type. We'll edit type. We'll duplicate it. Remember, always duplicate. And let's just say we want 1/8 inch. That might already be a preset, but just for the sake of the demo, we're going to do it this way. So it's 1/8 inch that I want. I would go down here to text size, and I'm going to change it to 1/8 inch. So that's over here. And I hit OK. And now my text has changed, and it's nice and small and will be easier to fit on the page with multiple other labels. And that is how you would label and show your drawings and put them on sheets. So hopefully that's making sense to everyone. That was kind of a lot. And we can always answer more questions later. There's plenty to learn on this program. But the main lesson here is that you don't have to 3D model everything, especially with a program like this. It is meant to have you draw things and then kind of fake it in. So for example, on our section, we can fake in those beams that are coming in because 3D modeling them can be really tricky, especially when it's your first time. So definitely make use of the detail lines and regions. And then just make sure that you're creating a page and the correct scale for every page. And then one last thing I want to show you guys before we end this very long-winded tutorial is that you can export sheets by pretending to print them. That's kind of the best way to export the sheets. You don't want to go file export. It doesn't work that way. So you go to file, you go to print, and then we're going to go to either print or print preview. Sometimes you need to do the print preview because your computer might be weird like mine. That will just show you the picture before you print it, but it really doesn't matter how you do that. It's just the settings after that matter. So we're going to hit print, and then we're going to do print to PDF, whatever that looks like for you. Mine has Bluebeam PDF, Adobe PDF. There's different ones that you can do, but make sure it's going to a PDF. And then we can go to this area and we can do select views and sheets instead of the current window, unless you just want to print that page. But I'm going to do selected views and sheets. And then I go down here to select. And then this is a lot to look at, right? There's so much going on. So if I just deselect this little views check mark, it's only going to show my sheets. So that'll make it easier when you're exporting. So I'm going to select the sheets, and let's just say I have 5 here. I'm going to make sure all 5 are checked. Hit OK. And then I'm going to say no. I never say yes to this question. It's one of those weird things that Revit offers for you to do. I would just hit no. And then I want to combine multiple selected sheets into a single file. So make sure that's selected. And then lastly, you want to make sure that your page exporting size is correct. So you're going to go to setup. You're going to check on the page size. Currently it says letter, which we know would be too small for this. I'm going to change that to tabloid. And then the rest of the settings should be fine. You shouldn't need to mess with those, hopefully. And then I'm going to hit OK. And then I'm going to just export it to my desktop so I can show you. And sometime today we should have a PDF. So if that doesn't export, you might need to do the print preview method that I did. Yeah, for some reason, mine requires me to do that workflow because it just gets stuck on the process otherwise. So if this happens to you, do the print preview method and it should hopefully resolve the issue. And I'm going to X out because you don't need to see the PDF. It's just this on a sheet. So that is how you use Revit and how you can use it for this project. Thanks everybody for bearing with me on that long-winded tutorial.